All right, here we are. No fanfare to open up tonight. No crazy stuff. We just are going to talk.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this show all day. Been thinking about a lot of stuff all day, and first of all, like kind of grateful, like thinking to myself, like, but at least tonight I can, have some conversation time with Paul, with our guest who's amazing. Feel connected to other people, and just it's just an outlet. And Paul, I don't know if you remember, but you and I started podcasting together during COVID as a
Yep.
like how in the world are we to process the world, and the conversation that's just you and me in our living room gets like a little like we wanted other people to be in on this, and that's where we started. And then here we are again, and I feel like this is all we know to do is just like be here tonight, talking to each other and learning from each other. And so the thought of a peppy little opening was making my stomach twist more knots than it already was. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is
I
a
hear you.
not not a happy night.
So here we are. And so, yeah, maybe our hope is that this will be cathartic. And so if you're joining us and we see Art and Bryce Yoakum is here. Bryce and Aaron are with us, two of our friends from Visalia, which is just south of here, and Peggy. You know, we really want to hear what you guys are processing. And it's been a day. I did a video, kind of just a stream of consciousness today of some people I saw online and well-intentioned, good-hearted were like, "Hey, it's going to be okay. It's all going to be good, and we're going to be okay." And I was just like, "I'm not there yet, guys.
Yeah.
I there. You can't tell me it's going to be okay. I'm
Yeah.
not sure it's going to be okay, and I need some time to be angry and scared and to cry and so." That's where I still am, and I want to give people room. Like we don't have to be buck up little trooper tonight. I do believe there will come a moment where I will be ready to stand and say, okay, now I'm a part of the resistance, and I'm going to lock arms with my siblings and my siblings of the world, and we're going to stand and protect each other as we need to. But today, I think, is a day for me of lament and mourning, and I'm a little bit afraid. I'm not ashamed to say, maybe in a way I've never been before in my life. I've had some people invalidate me for that, and but this is the process we're in right now, and so I do want to give people space to feel your feels, which some of our people on the right, our Christian friends, would say, no, all things work together for good. It's going to be fine. You crying libs, but I think we just need to process together tonight.
So we're going to get right into our discussion with our very, very special guest. I've on the other side of the interview, we're I think we got to just unpack like how have you been thinking about it? I definitely have thoughts. I started off the morning here. I was like, I don't know what to do. So anyway, we'll get to all that. But mostly we want to jump right into a conversation with a person that I know is going to add so much to what we're all thinking about tonight, because we get to read his articles, we get to read his books, and just know that he's got a lot to bring to the conversation. And he is the one and only Jim Fallows. So we'll bring him in from the green room. And Jim, before we jump in, let me just give everybody who may be meeting you for the first time, let me give them a little bit of background. James Fallows, we call him Jim, is a longtime book and magazine writer. The most recent of his 12 books is Our Towns. And this is how Jim and I first met, because as Jim and his wife, Deb, were flying around the country in their little airplane, meeting people on the ground, doing community building work in so many towns across America. That's how we encountered one another in Fresno. Bestseller. It's an amazing book, national bestseller, the basis of a 2021 HBO documentary. His works have won the National Magazine Award and the American Book Award. He grew up in Redlands, California, quite a bit south from here, but very similar to our hometown of Fresno.
Is that's the Fresno of Riverside County, I think, isn't it?
San Bernardino County, please.
San Bernardino.
Oh,
Oh,
there you
sorry
go.
about that.
Not that I'm sensitive about this. The biggest county in the world, bigger than like 4 East Coast states put together.
It is ginormous. It is ginormous. Studied American history at Harvard, economics at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. He's reported from around the United States for more than a decade. Jim was in China, Japan, Southeast Asia. He also worked as an editor of U.S. News and World Report magazine, on a program design team at Microsoft. And while in his 20s, I love this part, a chief White House speechwriter for Jimmy Carter. He now writes Breaking the News on Substack and has a new article about California's promising future in Wired magazine, which is great. Everyone can check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. And then today, Jim, you also had another wonderful piece that you published on Substack. That's just like the kind of moment. So, Jim, lay it on us. Like
hearing that bio, I feel unqualified to have you on the podcast.
So Ashley and Paul, it's wonderful to see you digitally this way, virtually, after seeing you in person in Fresno many times. And thanks for all of your guidance there. My wife, Deb, and I really enjoyed being in Fresno many times and telling your story. And so thanks for giving me this chance to join you. And it's a 24 hours ago at this time, we were with a number of friends in DC as a friend from Pennsylvania was starting to say, she's not getting enough votes out of Lackawanna County. She's not getting enough votes out of Philadelphia County, et cetera. So that was the beginning. And it's been a consequential last 24 hours, last 12 hours. So I can tell you either my thoughts or either the heart or the brain part.
Let's
you choose. What do you feel?
Yeah, that's right. We want to hear both. But let you
right
pick where you want to start.
So I'll start with the brain part. The reason I think this election is more consequential than 8 years ago when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton the first time is that there's so many ways you could argue the first time was a fluke. For example, I am sure, I'd bet any amount of money, even against Elon Musk, that if James Comey had not intervened 11 days before the previous election, that Hillary Clinton would have won. That if there hadn't been this obsession with emails back then, you've seen the graphics of a word cloud of a coverage of Hillary Clinton 8 years ago was 90% emails, and coverage of Trump was border and all the rest. So there are all sorts of things that made it seem like just a bunch of dominoes that happened to be lined up in the same way that all fell. This time, everybody knows who Donald Trump is. Everybody knows what he stands for. That his campaign in the last 2 weeks, having once worked in the presidential campaign, was as poorly run as any campaign has ever been. He was insulting women. He was insulting every kind of minority group. He was decompensating on the stage, and still people voted for him. And apparently a majority of American voters have voted for him, which is only the second time in the last 32 years that a Republican candidate has won a majority. So this tells us something about our country that I would rather not have known, that people knowingly brought him back to power. So that is the analytical part of this that I was talking about in this piece today, which I think gives us all reason to reflect. And can I say one more brain thing?
Of course.
So I quoted about 10 days ago, I quoted two really venerable and hugely experienced campaign consultants, Stuart Stevens, who worked for Mitt Romney and the second George Bush and many other people, John McCain, I believe he worked for, and James Carville, known to everyone from his Bill Clinton time and onward. Each of them said, James Carville wrote an actual op-ed in the New York Times whose title was "Why I Am Certain That Kamala Harris Will Win." And Stuart Stevens had a long post whose theme was similar, which was Democrats, stop your nervousness. I can tell you she's going to win. And the argument both of them used was that America is a better country than this, that in the end, people would not vote for somebody who had been a convicted, criminal and who had talked about his opponents the way he did. And they were wrong. And I was wrong to think that they were right, that there was still this reservoir. And so we have to take seriously that 51% of those who turned out decided this was the way to go.
So I'm hearing from people today like, oh no, it was the economy, James Carville's, it's the economy, stupid. Can we dismiss that this is a hard issue with the country and it's just a pocketbook vote?
So yes, comma, but blah, 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 which is that the economy, quote unquote, was what people talked about. But if you looked at any of the the boring actual numbers, this is the strongest economy an incumbent party has ever run on. When I was working for Jimmy Carter long ago, I left by the time he was having his reelection run against Ronald Reagan in 1980. But then the inflation rate was 20%. And it was just, it was ruinous. There was a stagflation economy. And to have the job growth that the administration that's we've had for the last 4 years, to have asset values rising, not the stock market is not the economy, but the stock market has been up, gas prices are going down, et cetera, et cetera. And so there has been a combination of inflation as a real problem over the last 2 or 3 years, getting better in the last 6 months, and a perception of the economy that has been one way or another through whatever are the sources of disinformation, have made people feel that this is a terrible economy, whereas by any actual measure, it is the best one any incumbent has ever run on, or at least since Franklin Roosevelt's time, since time preceding him. So yes, it is a pocketbook vote, but that says something strange too about our perception of the world, that this should be an economic crisis. But obviously that's what most people say.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's just the reality that there are some key goods that people are purchasing that are still very expensive, and purchasing power is just not there. And so, that in the middle of the nastiest, year and years and years and years now of misinformation, disinformation, the way in which our worst enemies can penetrate our thinking and our consciousness all the time. So we're in this shit tornado, right? And
that's the technical term, right?
It's nothing but shit flying around. I'll use it. I'll switch it. It's we're in a shit shower, and then we open our mouths. And people. So obviously, people are not hearing the rational truth, the fact base, etc. What I was hearing a lot of today was it's not going to be that bad. Come on, get over it. It's not going to be that bad. He's not really going to do that stuff. And I, kind of the pocketbook voter who could rationalize away all of the principled arguments around democratic processes and values and blah, 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 blah. Say a little something about how, because I'm wrestling with,
Yes.
I feel like those people are trying to bridge and say hey, I'm not co-signing on all this stuff, but then I have to conclude. So either you don't think it's possible, or it's you don't, I don't know. It's just a weird thing to kind of take that in, I'd say.
So let me give you an answer in the form of a question, if I could, which is to ask you about something actually you would know about directly, and then I'll come into this. It's not going to be that bad. So something I have been reflecting on in the past, 12 hours or so, is whether there was much more anti-woman in power misogyny than I had allowed for. I had thought Hillary Clinton had sort of been the icebreaker there. Kamala Harris had been around as a vice president. I thought that was accounted for, but there must have been more of that than I was thinking. As a successful woman politician, what say you?
1,000%. 1,000%, especially with the takeaway that Latino males were the big difference maker, I mean, I'm just thinking of this deep cultural bias that, I mean, it's pretty real. We're a majority Latino community, in Fresno. And like, you can look around like, oh yeah, that's a real thing. But there are different forces that kind of moderate and mitigate for that. But just imagining Latino males in all of these like blue collar counties and swing states, et cetera, breaking for Trump, and Black men not, but Latino males. I think that's what you have to conclude. And there's a big difference too about a white woman versus a woman of color.
Yeah. And I was getting from a lot of people the she's a hoe thing. And I was like, wait, he was having an affair with a porn star. And there is, I think, a man who has sex is virile and powerful, and a woman who has sex is a slut and a gold digger. And even I had comments that really some borderline, some not so borderline, that we want a man to go get what he wants. That's we need more men like that in the world. And I do think that is a disgusting thing that has really seeped its way into our culture in sort of this anti-woke backlash.
So just to follow on that for a second, and then I will answer, try to answer your question. So the three of us are white, for those of us, for those not able to see on the screen. How would the two of you as white people and me as a white person too assess the relative drag on Kamala Harris from being a woman versus being Black and Indian? How do you think the two of those, neither, what do you think? Which was more important, or we just don't know?
I think like it's equal parts of both. So being a white woman, let's say it's 50% harder than, and being a woman of color, it's 100% harder. So, I don't know. I have women of color in my office today that were crying because we've heard it. And I know, Paul, you were posting this on your stuff too. Like one of them, young woman in grad school, going to USC, super bright, talented, up and coming, worked in government, now doing great communications work. And what is she, she's like, okay, what I just heard was no matter what I do, I'm going to finish my graduate degree from US. No matter what I do, I will never, in this environment, I won't be good enough. And it's just like, that's the only way we can understand how that's hitting people.
Yeah. I saw an African-American woman post today. She said, okay, we hear you loud and clear. The worst white man is better than the best woman of color. That's the message we're all hearing loud and clear today. And Barack Obama said, it's my fault. In 2016, he said, Donald Trump is president because of me. I became the first Black president, probably 10 years too early. The country was not ready for a Black president. So I heard a lot of she's a woman. I think we're still okay with saying, I don't want a woman to be president. I don't know that we say, I don't want a Black person to be president.
That's
out loud quite as much, but I
it's
think
like a cover up.
Still very much there.
The misogyny is a cover up for the racism.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that JD Vance, I think Trump could not have picked a woman to be his running mate. He had to pick a white man. We're still there. It's really crazy.
So to go from a depressing theme to down towards the depths, is it going to be okay? So will it be that bad? I'll give you first the positive spin and then what I actually think. Well, I guess both of them are what I actually think, but the second is what I think more at the moment. The positive spin is that something that Barack Obama always said, and Jimmy Carter, who I worked for, said too, and Abraham Lincoln said, et cetera, is that keeping a democracy and society going, that is a struggle that is never over. That it is every single day. If it's going to exist, it has to be fought for and contested. And that is the challenge in the different ways we all can believe and take on for the months ahead, the years ahead, and forever. So this is the battle that goes on eternally. And it is a very significant setback in that battle. The is it going to be that bad? I will tell you all and the people on the show now something I haven't said to anybody else and haven't written. I am of the dreaded boomer era. I was in college during 1968 when things were going to hell during the Vietnam War. This is the worst thing America has done to itself in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
It is the worst thing because it's done knowingly. It's not the sort of the luck of eight years ago. And because the team around Trump knows what it's doing this time, as they didn't the last time. I think Trump himself, I believe he is falling apart mentally before our eyes, which means sooner or later we're going to have J.D. Vance. But so Trump himself is a creature of impulse. We know what he's like, but the people around him now know what they are doing. If Stephen Miller, he's had these 8 years to fester with his racist anti-immigrant plans. People doing foreign policy, they know that it's time to abandon Ukraine and how to do it. And they know how to destroy NATO and how to do it. And the people in the environmental world know how to work at odds with what states like California are doing. My sister, Sue, who is a big shot in the environmental world, she's the head of Resources for the Future. She's done a lot of U.S.-China environmental work. She says this is, a setback she will not live to see corrected. And so I think that the fact that they know what they're doing now means that the first point about the continued struggle is
Right.
more important than before.
So let's.
I'm sorry, actually, I was just going to, do you think, is the First Amendment in trouble? Do you think we will see I don't know, maybe not the dissolution of the First Amendment, but the dilution of it?
In my hierarchy of things to worry about, that's sort of not in the top radar zone.
Well, it is practically
Trump,
journalists being arrested.
Yes.
With reporters being arrested.
So Trump has talked about CBS needs to be shut down because of his complaint with 60 Minutes, and I may be having a failure of tragic imagination. I don't. I have fewer fears in that zone than I do of being swamped by misinformation, by the tsunami of shit, as Ashley is saying, which Elon Musk, is presiding over now. And so I think that it will be what's going to happen to the immigrant population, which is the soul of America, is something to watch for. Having the next, both Clarence Thomas and Alito are likely to resign the next year or two, and there'll be Eileen Cannon will be there, or Stephen Miller himself, or other people. So the judiciary has the control of the House. Has control of the House been called yet? I don't know.
I heard today we won't know until it'll take a week or two for California to finish up its counting, and we won't know control until California is finished.
That will be very important about whether there is any break in the system and the other break. So I think all of us, it's the next stage is thinking of what are the breaks that day by day.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So I was imagining today, just imagining the, sort of the fallout, the Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, all of this. And I'm just imagining, do you think it's possible that somewhere from the most unexpected reaches of, the Republican right in Congress, do you think there's any possibility that members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, would have any sort of a voice or a backbone when it comes to really fundamental American institutions and democratic principles? Do you think there's a point where they'd be like, Mike Rogers might be like, you know what? That's just a little too far.
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson. We're just not going to do that. Do you think that's possible?
So Anything is possible.
I don't know where we've seen it before.
Yeah. And a sobering example to me is the most influential person in the last half century in U.S. politics, even more than Donald Trump, is Mitch McConnell,
Right.
in my view.
Right.
And he had the chance after January 6th to take
Yeah.
Donald Trump
This is
entirely out of the
all
running.
Mitch's fault. All
It-
Mitch's fault.
Indeed, and there are 7 Republican senators who were, all of them, about to retire, et cetera, who were willing to impeach Trump and convict him the second time, which would, if he'd been convicted, then he would have been out of politics. But they couldn't get more Republicans, and so I think my impression is that the Republican Party, if Trump had lost, they would all be saying now, like Nikki Haley, "Oh, finally, we can move forward, et cetera, and be competing to be the next one." But now he seems even stronger with them. So anything is possible. Keep hope alive, et cetera, and we'll
Yeah.
see what can be done to make that seem attractive to
Yep.
to somebody.
Yep.
I
I mean, that's
it's,
all we got, right? It's like
Yeah.
the guardrails are gone.
Yeah.
It's all we have. That individual people would be able to like access, like be like, no, like that's actually a step too far for me. We are not going to throw away the democracy,
Well, and
So-
I think not only are the guardrails in the White House gone, the Supreme Court guardrails are gone, and a Steve Bannon type is going to be there to say, well, what if we just say, even if the Supreme Court rules against Trump, what
Yeah.
if we just say, we don't care what you say, Supreme Court? What army do you have to stop
Yes.
us?
Yeah. And so here is a little ray of sunshine, if you will.
Okay. All
So
right.
so if the 2 most right-wing members of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, are the ones most likely to peel off. They're the 2 oldest ones. Thomas, he can be, the Crow family of Texas can make it worth his while, et cetera. I think he's the most corrupt person to have been on the Supreme Courts, at least since the Gilded Age, et cetera. They're the 2 oldest, most likely to leave, and they're also the most right-wing. So if they are replaced, it's not necessarily a net change. And there are people I know who study the court who say they're placing their hopes on Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, imagining that the 2 of them might want to be seen as something other than part of the Dred Scott court.
Okay.
So that maybe we can hope for
Yeah.
Brett
That-
Kavanaugh and Amy
well,
Coney Barrett.
Well, and so and Masamoto, our friend here from Fresno, was asking, help, is there anything we can hope for? I mean, honestly, the midterms are not that far away, right? Like a break in the action could be one house. We got to get one chamber back.
Yes, and that is what to work. And California is very significant in that, among other ways. Yes, from the House seat. Sorry, I interrupted, Ashley.
No, that's okay. But like people are right now like raising money for midterm. Like it is on for 2 years from now, and that really could be a break. Like a very burned out emergency handbrake.
Yeah, and they were saying last night that the map really does benefit the Democrats in the Senate in 2
Yes.
years.
That is true, and you can think back. So Obama, most of what he had to get done, get done in his first 2 years, because the 2010 midterms were the dawn of the Tea Party, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was a huge loss. And Bill Clinton, similarly, that although he recovered in his second term, his first term essentially ended with the first midterms. And so, yes, it is worth concentrating on the midterms. It is worth invoking whatever supernatural intervention we can to see that how control the House is going to go when the count is finished. So trying to foster local resistance, local institutions, the midterms, and everything else.
Yeah, I think that my fear is, there's many, but Trump benefited from an economy that was already starting to roar when he came in, and he got credit for this great economy. And I think that's going to happen again. Like you said, the economy's good. And so now he's going to come in. He's got the media ecosystem on the right that's then going to tout, look at the Trump economy. Look at the Trump economy. So I am a little worried whether the midterms are going to, go the Dems' way or not.
And that is, we can't know. On economics, I will recommend an article that came out in the past week in the New Yorker by a longtime, friend of mine from college years onwards, named Nicholas Lemon, spelled Lemann. He's a former dean of the Columbia Journalism School, now a writer for the New Yorker. And essentially, it's the news nobody has heard about the way that the combination, that Bidenomics, the infrastructure investment, is the biggest thing since at least the New Deal, and that this will be, playing out, or not just over the next year or two before the midterms, but for a very long time, and how much Biden resents the fact that this, that they've done all this and getting no credit. But it's very much worth reading about sort of the real economic landscape we're dealing with. So I endorse that all, and it's not paywalled.
You were the head speechwriter.
So
I think we lost Jim. Did you?
I heard, Paul, you got cut off after speechwriter. Could you redo that again, please?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. You were the head speechwriter for the Jimmy Carter team. I read Stuart Stevens' book, It Was All a Lie. He talked about how the Republicans decided to go after the racist South in the early 70s. We know then around Carter came the moral majority, and we're going to weaponize abortion because we're pissed at Carter for the Jerry Falwell, Liberty University, Bob Jones University. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you said you stepped out before that campaign, but
before
did you guys see this weaponization of abortion and Christianity coming against Jimmy Carter, who is a Christian?
Yes. And I saw it coming at a specific moment in time. So I started working for Carter in sort of the spring of late spring of 1976. I was unemployed. My wife was in graduate school. I needed a job. $500 a month sounded good, so I joined the campaign team, and then stayed on for a couple of years in the White House. And Carter, he came from nowhere. It still is the most rapid rise in American political history. His name recognition was less than 1% a year before he was sworn in. And so he was, his base was, there were sort of three elements of his base, apart from it being post-Watergate and Gerald Ford having pardoned Richard Nixon. One was he worked kind of the editorial board circuit. And all the people in the big cities who heard him thought, this guy is really impressive. It was sort of a Mayor Pete phenomenon before his time, but somebody who was a peanut farmer and had been governor of Georgia. Second was the religious base. He was a born again Christian. He talked about that very freely, and this was a major part. He was and is a real believer. He's still alive at more than 100, and so lots of events were in churches where he would talk with great knowledge about the gospel and the lessons that were most important to him and what faith meant to him. And then there was the South itself. Jimmy Carter carried all of the old Confederacy except Virginia. The last Bill Clinton carried some of it, but Carter, that was his base, was the South. And this was before Nixon's Southern strategy began to kick in, as it did early in the Reagan times. And so there was a time, I remember a rally about a month before the election in Reading, Pennsylvania. Crucially, the 1976 race was the first one against after Roe v. Wade. So it was the first time that this was a national issue, much as this current election was the first one after Dobbs. And we went into this, some schoolhouse or something, or Union Hall in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was surrounded by anti-abortion protesters, who were mobilized from the local church. And from that point on in the campaign, the anti-abortion troops, were mobilized to come and sort of to protest all the events. And I can't remember exactly who it was. It wasn't Falwell, but somebody else was saying they recognized then this was going to be the new wedge issue for them. This was, and so that was, I saw it first in Reading, Pennsylvania. It was a feature of the rest of Carter's time in office. And Carter was not a big abortion fan, as you know. He and Gerald Ford were more or less on the same side of saying we don't like abortion, but Roe v. Wade is the way we can, we can work together, et cetera. So yeah, that became a factor. It wasn't what beat him, I think, in 1980. It was the terrible economy. It was the Iranian hostages, et cetera. But yes, I'll always remember that.
Well, and I mean that wave lapped our shores last night. I mean that is fueled generations of evangelical political activism. We had a comment or a question earlier in the chat from Bryce asking about like the connection between political evangelicalism and what we're seeing now. And like that's it. That was the inception of this wave that has continued and just has continued to grow. I mean, both Paul and I grew up in the evangelical church, Paul charismatic, me not so much, but basically the same difference was, they were speaking in tongues and we were not. They were raising their hands, we were not, but like it was the same kind of church. And
you were going to hell and we were not.
Oh, that's true. No. Well, actually, you thought you could go to hell if you accidentally said the wrong word on it. I at least was like once saved, always saved. So like I said the prayer when I was 4.
And you were going to hell
for the rest
because
of my life.
Your once saved, always saved beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but like all this stuff is ingrained and rooted deeply in faith traditions, like across the country.
And it was, as you all know better than I, it was intentionally weaponized, starting from the Carter era onward. And, you would not find two less likely standard bearers for pure Christianity than Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. And yet this is a crucial part. I mean, especially Trump. Reagan may have been to church at some point in his life. I don't think Trump would be struck by a lightning bolt if he came into a church. But it has been weaponized very shrewdly as what they can do, along with guns, along with anti-immigrant fervor. Now, I saw a comment a minute ago about somebody wanting more stories. I'll give a very brief one that's not on this topic, but it shows you the glamour of being a speechwriter. So with my glorious $500 a month salary, we're going to the Atlanta headquarters for the Carter campaign in early 1976. I got my first speechwriting assignment, which was to draft a bylined article for Jimmy Carter in the NRA magazine called My First Kill. It was about how he shot some possum. So I had to go say, well, Governor, can you tell me about shooting this possum? So he told me. And
God.
So that's the glamour of the speechwriting life.
Oh my God. That. Do you still have it, by the way? You need that for the archives, Jim.
It's someplace in the boxes in the attic, which Deb is always rolling her eyes at me to get. I think I'm supposed to give those to some university at some point.
By the way, Jimmy Carter is amazing and saying he wanted to live to vote for VP Harris. And I mean, I remember how many years ago was it? He went into hospice. And I remember telling Ashley, like, oh, Jimmy Carter's going to die. That's terrible. And I'm sorry, I can't remember his wife's name. She passed away before he did.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. Rosalind did. And just so this weekend, I'm actually going to be in Dayton, Ohio, where at an event where Jimmy Carter is getting a big, the Dayton Literary Peace Prize or something. And I'm going to be doing a Q&A with his grandson, Jason, about Jimmy Carter's legacy. So
that is precious.
Wow. But that's to Bryce's question that he asked in our feed here on the live stream. That's all it takes is for a candidate to say, yes, I'm a Christian, and show none of the characteristics of a Christian. Like you say, the irony is in 12 years as president, neither Reagan or Trump ever darkened the door of a church.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton went to church. Bill and Hillary went to church when they were in the White House, but and then say I'm anti-abortion, which I'm pretty sure Trump has paid for more than one in his lifetime. But Christians are like, that's all that matters to me. Just say you're a Christian and anti-abortion and you're my guy, And it's really for us a tragedy of a politicization of our religion that is really sickening to the core.
So I'll ask you, what will burn that out in the evangelical side?
Okay, this is literally Paul and I. I mean, this is like like a
This is where
decade
we
or more
this is where
of
we
like
part
of
ways.
well, I don't know about that. I was gonna say this is a decade or more of us just being like,
Oh, okay.
what? Like kind of like, wait, now, hold on. Like this isn't anything like Jesus. Like, are we all reading the same book? I mean, it is. I have been feeling like I've hyperventilated for like 12 years now, consistent hyperventilating. Like I cannot believe this. It so what's it going to take? I mean, this is where Paul and I do part ways a little bit because, Paul, your perspective is like, it's just going to be a really like crash and burn. We're going to have to experience all the consequences of this sort of thing for there to be a heart turn. And I guess I would say I'm aware of that might be what's needed. I sure as heck hope. I think I'm hopeful that human beings can find each other again in a different way, like that it doesn't have to come to calamity. So we do have a little different
I
perspective there.
I believe I have the Bible and history sadly behind me. And I think Jesus saw his religion in the first century, at least the story we read, had also been politicized. And I often say he saw a group of men saying, we need to make Israel great again. And, we need our religion and to be in charge of the country so God's plan can be existent on earth. And that is exactly who Mike Johnson is. We need our brand of Christianity to be in charge of the country, and then America will be great again and God's plan will exist on earth. And with the information ecosystem being so controlled by Republican propaganda and all of these things, I am not sure what else can fix it. But, what we see in Jeremiah in the Hebrew Torah saying, nope, we're not going to be okay. Babylon is going to take us. And that's God's mercy to get our attention back to the fact that we have to take care of the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, and the economically disadvantaged. And Jesus pointed at the temple and said, not one stone of that thing's going to stand on top of another. And so I was sort of leaning towards maybe we can be redeemed. But after last night, I'm a little bit in like, no, this is our choice. That we've chosen the king that we want, and we will have to face the consequences of that. And maybe that's what it's going to take to get our generational attention to turn back to something of goodness again.
I know that you all have devoted much of your lives to plumbing these issues and living these issues. So I respect what you say. I have a whole different, Deb and I have a whole different faith journey we can tell you about in another time. Now I'll just ask you: are there any statistics about how the evangelical vote went yesterday? Whether was it any more for Trump than it had been before? Is there any change, or just a constant?
It's a good question. I haven't seen anything yet. Have you, Paul?
I haven't, but I can't imagine. I mean, what was it? 81% in 2020. So I can't imagine that it's anything less than that. I was telling a statistic that I think in 76, Carter got like 49% of the evangelical vote, and that was like this huge number. Yeah. And then Reagan got 67% in 80, and then down to Trump in 2020 got 81%. So it has coalesced into this huge voting block. So I would assume we're going to be somewhere there or north of there from yesterday.
So I know, Jim, it's East Coast time where you are. You've been so gracious to be with us tonight. I wonder if you have time for one more question, and then we'll let you go, and we'll have a little more processing time with Paul and me. So you started off by saying you were going to share your brain version first, and I'm wondering, well, tell us about that heart view, or did you already kind of go over that too?
So the heart view is, again, I studied American history in college. I've, the sort of the running subject of every article I've ever written, every book I've ever written, essentially is America going to make it? Because the story of America is continuing to get in trouble and then getting out of trouble, and this is as this is again the worst blow that I can remember, and having been around, when George Wallace carried 5 states, and when that when it is a very troubling time, and in practical terms, I can send you to share with your audience a paywall link to a new article I have in Wired about why your California, my California from San Bernardino County, is going to be the laboratory of democracy for the foreseeable future, and that people need to take that seriously. That there's responsibility to work, to participate nationally and also in your community, but the state has a very important role. And where 1 American of every 8 lives there, $1 of every 7 in the U.S. GDP comes from there. And California, which has a bad image right now, actually, I think is going to be a place where a lot of good things can happen.
And when you published that, Jim, I think it was last week, like now it meant like maybe you had an idea when you were writing it, like how important that insight was, but now, like, oh my gosh, a week later, even more so.
Well, thank you. And then the Wired people very properly had me, sort of hedge it, whether we have whether we have a California-born president, the first Democrat from California, she would be, or whether California is going to be the reinvention state, more than the resistance state. Either way, what's happening there is important. So I will send you all in just a minute, again, a non-paywall link to share with your California and elsewhere viewers and listeners.
That's
so
awesome.
you don't think we're going to carve ourselves out with Oregon and Washington and say, hey, we'll go out on our own here and see what happens?
They can be part of the informal force field.
Okay.
I appreciate Moss's comment here in the live stream that we have hope in California. I do think that's the way we have to look at it. I also, for the Californians that are listening, we also have to be serious. Like, we are not playing around. Our state is not working right now.
Yep.
It has to work.
Yeah.
Yep.
It absolutely has to work. And it is now not just for the 40 million people who live here, but it is the American democratic experiment right now. The ideals, the values are there. The execution is not. We have to be honest about that. We have to freaking govern ourselves and care about implementation and execution, and not just like words that come out of mouths. Like, we have to do the work. So anyway, but I mean, I'm up for that.
I agree entirely, because it really matters how California comports itself. And from the heart, about the heart, Deb and I are most likely going to be spending most of our time in California for the foreseeable future, just because it's DC bears the stamp of whoever is in charge here.
That's it.
I mean, go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I'll see Jim next week in DC. We serve on a board together, and I will go on that trip. And I likely won't. I mean, I didn't visit the 4 years that Trump was president before. Not one.
And it seems like we need to get away from Democrat, Republican in California to, like, I don't know how to, reasonable people versus, the cracky people, and the reasonable people forget about Democrat, Republican, and just like, how do we solve things? And I don't know, Jim, and I know Ashley said last question, but in the kind of what we call the deconstruction community here, I don't know if you've heard that term, but a lot of people who are leaving faith are deconstructing their spirituality. We've had some talks in the network of these channels of, are we going to need to find ways to help women move around the country to get health care, or protect people who the government's coming after? I mean, could you foresee something like that to be needed in the near future?
Yes, and I think already with women, these women, every day we hear a story of a woman dying, mainly in the South. And one of my sons with his family lives in Texas, and that's happening all the time there. So, and you recall that very early in his first time around, Donald Trump had this sweeping anti-Muslim order or something like that, and citizens and people in New Jersey and New York showed up basically to block, the airports, to keep those kind of raids from happening. And so, I think, yes, practical help for people who are victims of new policies, that is a very important thing to do.
And if they start trying mass deportations, I think we may need to do the same and
Yes.
stand up and help. I mean, I still have some hope that if we start seeing people dragged out of their homes and put into white vans to be taken to some country they've never been to before, that's going to hit us and we're going to say, no, this is not okay. This is not America. I don't know. I'm holding out some hope for that.
And in very crass terms, we spent a lot of time in sort of the farm areas of the Midwest. Half their workforce is immigrants. You know, that
Yeah.
there are going to be
Yep.
no farms anymore, especially
Yep.
dairy farms, et cetera.
Yep.
So
All right,
All
Jim,
right.
thank
On
you
that
so
note.
much. I know. Well, give our best to Deb, and thank you for being with us, and
Thanks
you
for everybody joining
what you
in.
do.
And what matters, we all continue the work we start tonight and tomorrow. So thank you for giving me this chance.
What a joy to talk to you. Thank you, Jim.
See you all. Bye.
Okay. And for everybody else, we'll hang around a bit and keep processing. And yeah, Jim, we'll talk to you soon. I guess, you know, what's inspiring about that a little too is these are and Stephanie is saying she does not have that hope that Americans will be mortified by those pictures. I made a video of some pictures of 1959. We saw this in Chavez Ravine when the Brooklyn Dodgers were moving to California. Literally, Hispanic laborers were dragged out of their homes, police holding a woman by each hand and each foot, dragging her down the stairs so that their homes could be bulldozed for the Dodgers stadium to be built. And I just, if they're going to try to take 11 million, or as Trump changes the number every day to 21, 22 million people and send them out of the country, I just really, how would Americans do that? And yes, it would cost billions and billions to do it. But what I was going to say, Ashley, you know, it is maybe in times like this that we find out who we are, and maybe that could be part of the blessing of the moment.
Yeah. Huh. So, I think it would be good to just like spend a few minutes just kind of like allowing people who are listening, you and me. I mean, this like I've been looking forward to this time because I'm like, this is my healing moment for the day. So
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think I have ended the day imagining I have like this sort of mental image in my mind, and that is that every human being, I believe, and this was embedded in me from my Christian tradition, I believe every human being has like their spiritual part of them, their eternal part, their part that connects with, I do believe in a divine, you know, outside of a human experience. And I think every person has the ability to connect and is connected to the divine and carries that in them. And what I've learned after the last 3 years of pretty intense therapy for, you know, all the things that you and I are walking through together, my own healing journey, all the stuff I've needed to work through, is I think I've learned the power of that light that's in people, and the fact that there's nothing I can do. Like I've mostly just carried an agenda my whole life of like trying to convince somebody to think the way I think. And sometimes powers of persuasion are effective at whatever, but like in terms of deep heart attitude issues, people have to choose. They have to choose their own way. And so I've just been imagining, you know, the picture last night of the Palm Beach Convention Center and all the red hats, everyone waiting for Donald Trump to come out. And just imagine every one of those people, they have that spiritual component in them. And like, just imagine that they're in some way, they choose to see things a certain way. They choose to flip the switch and choose to engage with people. You know, I know I'm just imagining like people do still have the ability to change their hearts and minds. It's just they have to do it on their own. Like we can't make them. And I think that's a lot of kind of what this sort of MAGA movement is about, is feeling like there's been this um, you know, sort of judgment or criticism, or like, pushing them to think a certain way. And it's like this great big reaction to that. But like, what if people choose it on their own? Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, yeah, I let you hold that, and yeah, I worry again about the ecosystem. I don't know how they get out of it if they're inside an echo chamber that never gives them anything other than information that feeds the narrative. I do want to acknowledge we have some folks that are in on Instagram, and who I lost the name of the person who made. Somebody asked, and I'm sorry I lost the name. Somebody was asking. Oh, here it is. Sorry, Ronald. Ronald was asking thoughts on LGBT concerns in the future, and certainly one of my fears today is that the rhetoric of Trump, gives permission to people to be their worst self, and what does that mean for queer people, and how do people come out of sort of this mass hypnosis of, yeah, we hate trans people, they're coming after our kids, all of the things they're being told on right-wing media every day. And so in some ways there's got to be a break in that ecosystem
Right.
for that to happen. And that's why I think sometimes it does take calamity for us to start to focus on what matters,
Well,
and yeah.
okay. But also, I mean, we do a fair amount of work in this space of like, you know, bridging different community groups and dealing with, systemic barriers that different people groups, whether racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, there's a lot of there's a lot of research around what actually changes people's minds or doesn't. And all the research validates it is one-on-one connection. It's you like connecting with someone who has it's why there are these major initiatives like StoryCorps, where you get people from different walks of life to just sit down and record, like share their life story with another person, and that gets recorded and they get shared out. So the ecosystem breaking, like it's actually probably more likely that a different person crosses their path, and maybe at work or something, and their in relationship is fostered. And then in that, like people just start to find their way a bit differently. I don't know that it has to be some massive ecosystem shift, although that would be nice.
I think what we have to be careful of is, and I'm new in this space a little bit, so it's really not mine to hold and own. But I think there are people who understandably are saying, hey, we've been fighting this fight since the 80s. And yesterday was an indication that we haven't come nearly as far as we thought we had. So anyway, I think we just have to be careful not to
Yeah.
invalidate that. I think there are queer people today who are like, I thought we were much farther along, and
Right.
BIPOC people and such who are like, how can this be? It's 2024. It's not
Yep.
1978
Well,
anymore.
I think that's that one of the layers of sort of intense stuff for me is shock. Is this total stunned, like, what in the actual bleep, like, are what is this? In 2016, to be honest, I knew Trump was going to win. Okay.
You did?
I did. I knew he was going to win.
Oh
I
my
was not
gosh, I
shocked by
had
it.
no idea. I was totally stunned.
No, I was not shocked, but I really did not expect this. So, yeah, so that's part of it is just like, it's like being like stun gunned.
I do believe there were a lot of people who voted their pocketbook. And I think Jim echoed that. But you either had to be, and somebody wrote a pretty long dissertation on Instagram of you have to be pretty unknowledgeable about economics to have made that choice. But and again, the ecosystem thing comes into play there. But you also have to make a choice of like, on one level, it's like I'll take the rapist as long as the price of my eggs come down, or to be very crass, and I'm sorry about that, or it's as I was hearing on one podcast today, I think the ecosystem coming off of COVID probably is Americans are like, we don't trust anything the Democrats say anymore because we've been told over and over again they lied about the pandemic, they lied about shutting down the businesses and the schools and all of these things. And so as Harris was doing a very, very good campaign in very difficult circumstances, they were just like, yeah, you're telling us the economy's getting better, but we don't believe you.
Yeah.
And so that's a very difficult position that we're in as a country right now.
Yeah. Well, and like, things are still expensive. Like,
Yeah.
So, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Um,
I do wonder. I mean, like I said, I do think Trump's he'll come in and I saw gas at $3.95 today, and he'll get credit for that.
Yeah.
But if he starts throwing tariffs on a lot of things, prices are going to start jacking up again real quick, and that may portend poorly. So
Yeah.
well, we have some people commenting. You want to interact with some of these?
I'm so frozen. I'm so stuck.
Okay.
Like, I feel like people who are listening to this on audio, maybe a few days from now, they're like, what you're going to hear from me is just, I feel like a kind of blubbering idiot right now. Like, I am really lost. I'm really, really lost. I'm exhausted. There are a lot of layers to work through. I'm trying to not, like, my natural tendency is to try to fix it and make it okay for people. And I know that Fixer Ashley doesn't need, like, there's nothing I can do, but I'm trying to make it okay for you. I'm trying to make it okay for our kids. I'm trying to make it, and it's like, we just can't, we can't rush in and try to make things better. And then I'm also thinking ahead of like, if there is a path, if there is a bridge to be built, how do you do that? And how do you lay the groundwork now for that? Because I really do fear what happens if we're not able to build a bridge with people.
I think for the queer community, I'm inspired. You watched the movie Milk the other night, and
Yep.
I watched. We both listened to the podcast series of Gays versus Briggs, or Briggs versus
Slow burn.
Gays.
It's amazing.
Slow burn. And Harvey Milk saying, "If you're gay, come out." It's a hard thing to say, but stand up and show, or show out, because people need to know that
They have to know you. If they know
you.
Yeah.
They have to know that they know, like you're saying, one-on-one, let them know that that police officer, they know, that teacher, they know, that pastor, they know, that you name it, they know, is queer and is okay, is a good person. And I think that may be a clarion call again. Like, you've been hidden, and we respect that and we understand it, but now
Yep.
may not be the time, if you can, without putting yourself in grave danger, step up and step out and find somebody who will stand by you as you do it, because we may need some help in those spaces. And so Pucky is saying, if you do start an underground thing helping women and others, let me know. I want to help. I live in mostly blue Minnesota. I'm going to try to connect with other like-minded people and see what we can do. And so this may be our fixing thing for a while. It's like, how can we stand with people who might be a little bit in jeopardy if things go poorly as we look at what's coming ahead. Charlie says, I'm terrified, so I can only imagine how it is for my trans bros and sisters. I'm in Texas. There was a pastor that went to city council meetings saying that the LGBT plus community needed to be put to death. Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think maybe, let's give up the weight of fixing things today. It is a day of grieving and lament, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure that my shocked, stunned silence is not a particularly good listen for people. I was really imagining that I could work through some things by being on the show tonight and talking with you and seeing comments from other people. And I think I'm like, I'm like a sparking robot, slowly.
Well, Doug on the left to bring a different is asking why you have pronouns on yours and I do not.
Well, I know why I have my pronouns. I don't know why you do not, other than you have your long social media handle there. So maybe you just didn't want to take up any more room.
Yeah, I assume this is your professional Zoom handle, and you're in the spaces where people put their pronouns on their name, right?
I guess so, although I probably typed that at some point specifically for the platform that we do this podcast on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and
so
mine, and you're exactly right on mine.
it would just keep going.
It'd just
and
be
going.
very long. I've got my social media handles, and it would just be really long. Then to add at some point, people's eyes just go to a blur when something is too long there. So that's why I did it that way.
Well, listen, I appreciate, Rebecca, your comment about us holding space. That is definitely what we were hoping to do and what we always do love doing. I would just say, we thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much for connecting with us here. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up for the Evangelical-ish newsletter, Unconventional Pastor Paul. You can go to our website, evangelical-ish.com, just sign up. It's free. And then we will be able to stay in close touch. I think we're thinking about maybe we should do a Zoom for anybody who needs more time and space, maybe sometime over the weekend. So let's just all stay in touch. And again, make sure you're on our list so you are, get the emails. And you can always do direct message Paul. He loves to interact with folks, and you all are inspiring to us. So let's stay there for each other. And
And as Sherry is mentioning, we do have a private Facebook group for Evangelical-ish, so you can join us over there. And a lot of people carry each other's burdens there. As I wrote in the newsletter today, the word for Holy Spirit in the New Testament is paraclete. And what paraclete literally means is one who walks alongside. And I believe we are to be paracletes to each other and carry each other's burdens as we walk alongside. And so let's do that in this season together. So. Yep.
All right.
Okay. Love you all. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you again on YouTube